People on the left love repeating the old line, religion is the opium of the masses. The idea being that religion gives people false hope instead of solving material problems. But the real opium of the masses is democracy. Democracy is what convinces people that they are free while power continues expanding around them. Democracy is what teaches people to mistake participation for voluntary association. Democracy is what persuades people that because they are allowed to vote every few years, somehow the system belongs to them. And before conservatives start nodding along, I want to make it clear I'm talking about them. They are constantly working overtime to legitimize this exact problem. Conservatives constantly talk as though democracy and freedom are basically the same thing. They talk about spreading democracy as if democracy itself is liberty. They compare voting to speech. They act as though elections are what separates freedom from tyranny. But democracy has nothing to do with freedom. And conservatives are reinforcing the exact belief system that collectivists depend on. Democracy is completely compatible with collectivism. Freedom requires boundaries majorities cannot cross. And conservatives already know this on some level. Why else are they worried about voter ID laws or mass immigration changing the electorate? Clearly, they recognize democracy can become tyranny right up until the conversation changes and democracy suddenly becomes sacred again. You would think conservatives would notice something strange here. Why do you think America's two major political parties are literally called Democrats and Republicans? Republicans have chosen to brand themselves around a moderated form of democratic rule rather than freedom itself. Meanwhile, the people constantly attacking property rights, demanding redistribution, regulating speech, and expanding the state also openly identify themselves with democracy. That should probably be a clue to you conservatives, and even more so to the people who think they are enlightened because they recognize both parties are bad. If you're not anti-democracy, you're just as lost as the people who identify with one of the parties. And nowhere is this contradiction more obvious than secession. Look at Alberta. Look at Quebec. Conservatives often think they're defending freedom by saying separatists should at least get a referendum. But what conservatives fail to notice is that they are accepting a disastrous premise. Stop and actually think about it. The moment you say freedom requires a democratic vote, what have you already conceded? You've conceded that rights depend on majority approval, and you've conceded that people cannot simply withdraw consent from a political arrangement, that they first need permission from enough strangers. Think about how backwards and tyrannical that really is. If people peacefully want to leave a political system, why is that a political question at all? Why should someone's natural right to peacefully disassociate suddenly become suspended until enough voters approve of it? I understand that you think you're doing something good when you argue with people who want to deny separatists a vote, but what you're actually doing is strengthening the exact religion of legitimacy that will later be used against you. Because once rights become democratic questions, the left eventually wins. Democracy is perfectly compatible with violations of property rights. It is perfectly compatible with collectivism. What democracy is not compatible with is a fully free society rooted in voluntary association and property rights. Freedom means control over your own life, labor, property, and associations without coercion. Democracy is just a procedure for choosing rulers. Those are not the same thing. You can vote in a deeply coercive society. You can vote while being taxed into oblivion, surveilled, censored, inflated into poverty, regulated, or even locked down. If a king did these things, people would call it tyranny. And ironically, kings at least had some incentive to not consume all political capital immediately because they would eventually pass the country to their heirs. Democratic politicians inherit nothing, so their incentives are far shorter term. But when politicians do the same tyrannical things after an election, millions of people defend it because the people voted. Democracy does not eliminate tyranny. In fact, you can often still vote in prison. Voting is not freedom. Democracy simply legitimizes tyranny. What evidence is there that democracy prevents tyranny? The biggest expansions of state power in recent years, lockdowns, censorship pressure, monetary expansion, which is inflation, emergency powers, and endless spending, including on wars, all happened under governments that went through perfectly proper democratic channels. Democracy stopped none of it. Democracy helped justify it. Instead of asking, what rights do people actually have, democracy trains people to ask, can we get enough votes? And once rights become political questions, they stop being rights. If your speech or your property or your ability to peacefully associate or disassociate depends on public opinion, they are not rights. Democracy is an incredibly effective tool for dissolving recognition of natural rights because it teaches people that morality comes from procedure, that if enough people vote for coercion, somehow coercion becomes legitimate. And here's the uncomfortable truth no one likes admitting. Your vote statistically means nothing. One vote is a drop in the ocean, which means people have no rational incentive to become deeply informed on politics, monetary policy, law, political incentives, or foreign affairs. Democracy does not turn citizens into philosophers, far from it. People outsource their beliefs to slogans, tribes, media personalities, and party branding, because spending hundreds of hours mastering issues your vote will never affect makes no sense. Democracy is the opium of the masses because it gives people the feeling of political agency while teaching them to surrender real freedom. It convinces people that they are free because they get to vote, while teaching them that every aspect of life should be a political question settled by coalitions and majorities. Freedom is not having a vote every 4 years over who controls you. Freedom is not needing permission in the first place.